The news came from deep beneath the Atlan Wastes, a desolate expanse of sun-scorched terrain lying between what was once known as South America and Africa. Buried under layers of rock and ash, the tunnels beneath the wastes were ancient, their purpose long forgotten. Once a hub of activity during the dark age of technology, these subterranean corridors had become infested with horrors spawned from centuries of neglect and mutation. In the Emperor's War Council chamber, a map of Terra's subterranean networks glowed faintly, its intricate lines revealing a labyrinth beneath the surface. Standing beside the Emperor was a figure robed in dark finery, his calm voice carrying the weight of grim news. The creatures are converging, abandoning their scattered lairs to mass within the tunnels, the man reported. They are not led by any intelligence, yet their actions suggest a kind of instinctual unity. They're drawn to specific locations within the depths. The Emperor studied the map with an expression of measured thought. If this tide rises to the surface, it will destabilize everything we have achieved. The infestation must be eradicated completely. No remnants can remain. Records suggest the presence of biolaboratories and weapons vaults from the dark age of technology within the area, the robed figure added. If those have been unearthed, the danger is greater than we anticipated. The Emperor's gaze did not waver. Whatever lies beneath the wastes, we will claim or destroy it. There will be no compromise. The war host gathered swiftly. Custodian Valdor led the vanguard, his presence an imposing blend of calm authority and unshakable resolve. The Thunder Warriors, towering in their brutal armor, stood ready for war. Their numbers were bolstered by the unaugmented Loyalists, bands of Terran soldiers armed with scavenged weapons. Though far less formidable than the Thunder Warriors, these disciplined mortals were vital for securing the operation. When Valdor spoke, his voice carried over the clamor of the gathered host. You have your orders. We descend into the depths not for conquest, but to safeguard Terra's future. Every shadow must be burned away. Every trace of the infestation must be destroyed. The Emperor commands it, and we obey. The Thunder Warriors roared their assent, their voices reverberating through the mountain stronghold. The mortal soldiers, though quieter, stood firm, their captains barking orders to finalize their preparations. The campaign began with precision. Auspex drones and reconnaissance teams mapped the tunnels, clearing paths through ancient debris and collapsed structures. The Thunder Warriors led the charge, striking with overwhelming force, while the Loyalists worked methodically to establish outposts and secure supply lines. The tunnels quickly proved dangerous. The deeper the forces pushed, the more oppressive the air became, thick with rot and decay. Ambushes erupted without warning, hordes of mutants swarming from hidden crevices and collapsed chambers. The mutants were grotesque, their twisted forms bearing the scars of centuries of unchecked genetic corruption. Despite their feral attacks, the Thunder Warriors met them with merciless efficiency. Valdor was always at the forefront, his master-crafted spear gleaming in the dim light as he cut through the horde with terrifying precision. In the rear, the Loyalist soldiers faced their own trials. A company stationed at a junction found themselves cornered as mutants surged from multiple directions. Their captain, a veteran of previous campaigns, quickly took command. "Barricade the eastern corridor," the captain shouted. The soldiers moved with practiced discipline, their autoguns rattling in the dark as they held the mutants at bay. Flamethrowers roared to life, filling the passage with searing heat and light. Even as the tide pressed harder, the Loyalists held firm, their cohesion a testament to their loyalty. At the height of the chaos, Valdor arrived, his armor streaked with the remnants of battle. With a single, decisive strike of his spear, he scattered the mutants, pressing the Loyalists' line. Deeper in the labyrinth, the Horde's numbers only seemed to grow. Their relentless surges began to reveal patterns, clusters of resistance focused around certain points. The Emperor's forces advanced steadily, but the cost in effort and blood was rising. Their actions are chaotic but consistent, the robed advisor murmured from the command chamber. It is instinct driving them. They don't understand it, but they are defending something. The Emperor's reply was calm, yet resolute. What they guard belongs to the past. It has no place in humanity's future. We will find it, and it will be dealt with. The forces pressed onward, their illuminators cutting through the oppressive dark. But the further they advanced, the more evident it became that the true horror of the Atlan Wastes had yet to reveal itself. The tunnels beneath the Atlan Wastes twisted and branched in maddening ways. Paths that appeared mapped would suddenly curve into collapsed chambers or seemingly endless corridors. Every kilometer deeper took the war host closer to the unknown heart of the infestation. Valdor moved at the front of the vanguard, his senses sharp. Though he appeared outwardly composed, he knew better than to trust the stillness between battles. A dull rumble echoed through the tunnels, faint at first, but growing in intensity. The sound carried a rhythmic pulse, like a massive engine waking from centuries of slumber. Valdor raised a hand, halting the column. The Thunder Warriors came to a stop, their armored forms looming silently in the half-light of the lumen strips that lined their path. "Report," Valdor commanded through his Vox link. "Movement ahead," one of the scouts replied from a forward position. "It's not just another horde. There's machinery, deep vibrations coming through the rock." The Emperor's voice cut across the comm line, calm but commanding. "Proceed cautiously. The remnants of the Dark Ages technology lie deeper still. If they have awakened, we must understand their purpose before they are extinguished." Valdor gave the signal to advance, and the host pressed on. The scouts moved swiftly but silently through the crumbling corridors ahead, their Auspex scanners searching for anomalies. Meanwhile, the Terran soldiers reinforced key junctions and choke points, ensuring the Vanguard's supply lines remained secure. One such company held an outpost at a crossroads chamber. It was a wide, circular cavern lined with ancient columns, their surfaces worn smooth by time. The soldiers stationed there worked with a quiet urgency, setting up gun emplacements and reinforcing barricades. They knew they were on borrowed time. The mutants would return, of that there was no doubt. "We'll hear them before we see them," muttered one of the sentries, gripping his autogun nervously. His comrade gave a curt nod, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the barricade. The sentry was proven correct. The distant echoes of shuffling feet and guttural growls reached them first, a rising tide of sound that filled the chamber with dread. Within moments, the darkness beyond the columns was alive with movement. Shadows shifted and swarmed as the first wave of mutants rushed forward, howling in fury. "Open fire!" the captain barked, and the outpost erupted in a cacophony of gunfire and flame. Autoguns blazed, and las rifles cracked through the air. Lines of mutants fell in the first volley, their malformed bodies collapsing in heaps. Yet more came, heedless of the carnage ahead. Flamethrowers roared to life, turning the narrow choke points into infernos. Still, the horde pressed forward, their monstrous forms clawing over the burning remains of their kin. Despite their training and preparation, the soldiers began to falter under the sheer weight of the assault. The barricades groaned as clawed hands and improvised weapons battered against them. The captain ordered a fallback to secondary lines, but before the mutants could breach the barricade fully, a sudden, blinding flash of golden light filled the chamber. Valdor entered the fray like a force of nature. His spear moved with lethal precision, each thrust and sweep cutting down multiple attackers in a single motion. The mutants recoiled in terror as his advance shattered their momentum. The Thunder Warriors followed in his wake, their bolters hammering the horde into submission. Within minutes, the chamber fell silent once more, save for the crackling of dying flames. Valdor turned to the captain, his expression unreadable behind his golden helm. "You've held this ground with honor," Valdor said, his voice resonant and calm. "The Emperor's trust in you is not misplaced." The captain saluted, still catching his breath. "We'll continue holding this position, Lord Valdor." "See that you do," Valdor replied before turning back to the deeper tunnels. Without wasting a moment, he signaled for the vanguard to regroup and continue the advance. As they pushed further, the tunnels widened into massive cavernous spaces. Signs of ancient construction were everywhere. Vaulted ceilings supported by massive buttresses and conduits running along the walls, long-dead systems of unknown purpose. The rhythmic pulsing sound grew louder, reverberating through the stone with an almost organic quality. The Emperor's voice echoed across the Vox once more. "You are approaching one of the central chambers. Be prepared. What lies ahead may not be wholly mechanical." Valdor acknowledged the order, gesturing for his forces to fan out and approach the chamber entrance cautiously. The lumen strips flickered as they crossed the threshold, their lights struggling to pierce the vastness of the space beyond. Inside, the air was stifling and heavy with an unnatural stillness. In the center of the chamber stood a monolithic structure, a twisted fusion of metal and flesh, pulsing with a sickly, rhythmic glow. It towered over the ruins like a grotesque idol, its surface marked with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when observed too closely. One of the Thunder Warriors spoke, his voice uneasy. "What is this thing?" Valdor approached slowly, his spear held at the ready. "An abomination of the past," he said quietly. "The remnants of those who sought to defy the natural order." He activated his Vox link. "Emperor, we have found a construct unlike anything previously recorded. It appears alive." There was a pause before the Emperor responded. "Secure the area. No matter what it is, it must be neutralized. I will join you soon." The host braced themselves, weapons raised. The construct's glow intensified, and the chamber filled with a deep, resonant hum. Something ancient and terrible was awakening. The air grew colder as Valdor's forces advanced deeper into the tunnels beneath the Atlan Wastes. The faint glow from their lumen strips reflected off walls slick with moisture, creating an eerie, shifting play of light. Every footstep echoed endlessly in the vast, decaying network of passageways, and the rhythmic pulsing from deeper within the structure became more pronounced. "Commander, I'm detecting shifts in the tunnel structure." A voice crackled over Valdor's Vox link. It was one of the forward scouts. "Seismic activity. It's not natural. We may be looking at reactivated systems." Valdor slowed the column with a hand signal. His gaze swept the surrounding architecture. The tunnels had widened, now resembling ancient industrial thoroughfares, with overhead conduits and massive support columns that suggested forgotten technologies once coursed through these depths. If anything was coming to life again, it was a sign that the threat was far from limited to the mutants. "Advance cautiously," Valdor ordered. "Thunder Warriors, hold the line. Terran units, secure the junctions and fallback routes." The soldiers obeyed swiftly. Teams of Terran engineers began setting up stabilizers and barricades, their tools clanking in the dim light. Captain Voran moved among them, coordinating defensive placements. His calm yet forceful commands kept the soldiers focused, despite the growing sense of unease. "You've got 15 minutes to set the supports," Voran said to his lead engineer. "If we get pinned down here, I want these positions to hold." As the soldiers worked, a distant rumble sent vibrations through the floor, shaking loose dust from the high vaulted ceiling. A faint, inhuman roar echoed from the depths beyond, growing louder with each passing second. Valdor's expression remained unchanged, but he lifted his spear in a silent gesture of readiness. "Mutants incoming," one of the sentries called out, his voice tense. Shapes emerged from the shadows ahead, first in 2s and 3s, then in a surging mass. These mutants were larger and more distorted than the ones encountered before. Bodies elongated and fused with unnatural growths of chitin and bone. They moved with a savage, frenzied determination, their guttural cries reverberating through the tunnel. "Stand your ground," Valdor commanded, his voice steady. The first wave charged, claws and makeshift weapons glinting in the flickering light. The Thunder Warriors met them with a brutal counterstrike, their bolters unleashing disciplined bursts of fire. The corridors lit up with each shot, casting momentary flashes across the grotesque forms of their enemies. Behind them, the Terran soldiers fired in coordinated volleys. Autoguns rattled and flamers hissed as they repelled the flanking elements. Voran directed his men with precision. "Concentrate fire on the sides. Keep them from circling us," he ordered. Despite their ferocity, the mutants faltered under the sustained assault. Their advance slowed as bodies piled high in the narrow corridors. The few that breached the front lines were cut down swiftly by Valdor himself, his spear moving in a blur of calculated strikes. Yet the seismic tremors intensified and cracks began to form along the walls. Pieces of the overhead conduits snapped loose, crashing to the ground in bursts of sparks. Valdor noted the growing instability and activated his Vox link. "Status report on tunnel integrity," he demanded. "Multiple shifts detected across the sector," an engineer responded. "Structural collapse imminent if the tremors continue." Valdor turned toward Captain Voran. "Pull back your secondary lines. Secure a fallback position beyond the last junction. We hold here until reinforcements arrive." "Yes, Commander," Voran replied, motioning for his troops to reposition. Suddenly, a deafening roar erupted from the tunnel ahead. The mutants scattered, retreating into the shadows as a massive shape loomed at the edge of the light. It was a grotesque fusion of flesh and ancient machinery, its limbs reinforced with rusted plating and pulsing veins of exposed organic matter. The creature's eyes glowed with a malevolent, deep red light as it let out another bellow that shook the walls. The Terran soldiers hesitated, the sheer size of the creature momentarily freezing them in place. Valdor stepped forward, unflinching. "Engage with all available firepower," he commanded. The chamber exploded into action. Bolters roared, and last fire lanced across the creature's armored frame. It charged forward with terrifying speed, slamming into the defensive line with enough force to send shockwaves through the floor. Terran soldiers scrambled to reposition, their heavy weapons focusing on its limbs. Valdor moved swiftly to intercept, his spear crackling with energy as he drove it into one of the creature's exposed joints. The beast howled in rage, swiping at him with a massive clawed appendage. Valdor evaded the strike with fluid grace, countering with a series of precise blows that forced the creature to stagger back. "Focus on its mobility," he barked. "Target the exposed sections." The Thunder Warriors pressed the attack, their combined firepower gradually wearing down the creature. A plasma shot from one of the Terran heavy teams struck its central torso, sending it reeling with a shriek of pain. Seizing the moment, Valdor lunged forward, delivering a devastating thrust to its core. The creature convulsed violently before collapsing in a heap, its corrupted systems sparking and flickering as it expired. Silence returned to the tunnel, broken only by the labored breathing of the soldiers and the distant echoes of retreating mutants. "Status?" Valdor asked, his gaze sweeping the battlefield. "Minimal casualties," Voran reported, though his voice carried an edge of exhaustion. "Structural stability is deteriorating, but we've reinforced key points." Valdor nodded. "Good. We continue the advance. Whatever lies deeper within these tunnels must be dealt with swiftly." The soldiers regrouped, gathering their wounded and resetting their formations. The pulsing hum from the distant monolith grew fainter, but the tremors persisted. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that this was not just a battle against mutants. It was a confrontation with Terra's buried past, and the stakes were rising with every step forward. The advance continued through the fractured tunnels, now trembling with irregular seismic pulses. Dust and debris fell from the vaulted ceilings with each tremor, and the oppressive atmosphere grew heavier, as if the tunnels themselves were aware of the intrusion. Despite the growing instability, Valdor led the vanguard without hesitation, his presence steady and commanding. At a wide intersection ahead, the scouting team signaled a halt. One of the scouts approached Valdor, his armor scuffed from earlier skirmishes. "Commander," the scout reported, "we've found something. There's a large chamber a few hundred meters ahead, partially intact but flooded with some kind of luminescent mist. We detected energy signatures from inside, old, possibly dormant systems." Valdor considered this for a moment. "Any signs of hostile presence?" "None so far, but we've seen movement on the periphery, possibly residual patrol patterns from the constructs." Valdor raised a hand, signaling the Thunder Warriors to tighten their formation. "Prepare for an assault. We will investigate. Loyalist forces, hold this junction and fortify the rear. No surprises from behind." Captain Voran acknowledged the order and immediately began issuing commands. "Set up overwatch positions. I want heavy guns ready to cover both entry points. Engineers, reinforce the support beams. These tremors are only getting worse." The Terran soldiers moved swiftly, fortifying their positions with barricades and weapon emplacements. Some exchanged uneasy glances as the ground shook beneath them, but Voran's steady presence kept their nerves in check. "Stay sharp," Voran said as he passed a line of riflemen. "This deep underground, echoes can play tricks on you. We don't break formation unless ordered." Meanwhile, Valdor and his vanguard advanced toward the chamber. The lumen strips lining the corridor flickered erratically, and the walls seemed to close in around them as the passage narrowed before opening into a vast space. The chamber was unlike any they had encountered thus far. Massive, cathedral-like in scale, its walls were lined with towering machines that hummed faintly with dormant power. Pale, bluish mist clung to the floor, swirling in unnatural patterns as if alive. At the center of the chamber stood another construct, similar to the monolith they had previously encountered, but far more elaborate in design. Its surface was etched with geometric symbols that pulsed faintly in sync with the tremors beneath the ground. Valdor approached cautiously, his spear at the ready. "Scanners, report on this structure's activity," he ordered. A Thunder Warrior activated a portable Auspex unit, analyzing the readings. "Energy buildup detected within the central core," the warrior confirmed. "No active defenses, but there are fluctuations. Something's unstable." "Expand the perimeter," Valdor commanded. "No one touches the structure until we understand its function." The warriors spread out, securing key points around the chamber. The tension was palpable as every sound echoed unnaturally across the towering walls. One of the soldiers, standing near a rusted control panel embedded in the floor, hesitated as the mist thickened around his feet. He tapped his boot against the surface, the metallic clang reverberating far longer than it should have. "Something isn't right here," the soldier muttered, glancing nervously at his surroundings. Without warning, a low, resonant hum filled the chamber. The pulsing lights on the structure intensified, and the floor beneath them vibrated in rhythm with the sound. Shapes began to emerge from the mist, large mechanical figures that seemed to materialize from the shadows. They were humanoid but grotesquely modified, their limbs reinforced with ancient machinery and strange organic grafts. "Hostiles!" one of the Thunder Warriors shouted as the constructs advanced. Valdor moved instantly, spear in hand. "Engage, protect the perimeter, no retreat." The chamber erupted into chaos as the constructs attacked. They moved with a mechanical efficiency, their strikes heavy and deliberate. Thunder Warriors met them head-on, exchanging devastating blows in a contest of raw power. Sparks and debris scattered as Valdor clashed with one of the largest constructs, his spear slicing through its reinforced armor with precise, calculated strikes. Behind him, Terran reinforcements arrived, deploying heavy weaponry along the perimeter. Captain Voran's voice cut through the Voxnet. "Focus fire on their joints. Slow them down," he ordered. Last fire and autogun rounds hammered into the constructs, targeting their vulnerable sections. One of the larger entities stumbled as concentrated fire shattered its knee joint, sending it crashing to the ground. Despite the coordinated attack, the constructs fought with relentless determination. One managed to break through a section of the line, its massive frame crushing a barricade underfoot. Valdor intercepted it before it could cause further damage, driving his spear through its central core in a single fluid motion. The construct's limbs spasmed violently before it collapsed, its systems flickering and going dark. "Push them back," Valdor ordered, his voice calm but commanding. The battle continued for several intense minutes before the remaining constructs began to falter. With a final coordinated assault, the warriors and soldiers disabled the last of their attackers. The chamber fell into a tense silence once more, the only sound being the faint hum of the central structure. "Casualties?" Valdor asked. "Minimal," Voran responded, wiping dust from his armor. "No fatalities, but a few wounded. We'll regroup and fortify the perimeter." Valdor nodded, turning his attention back to the monolithic structure at the center of the chamber. Whatever lay at the core of this network, it was more than just a relic of the Dark Age. Its design was too precise, too deliberate. He activated his Vox link, sending a direct message to the Emperor. "Construct contained," he reported. "Encountered automated defenses. Situation stable for now, but I suspect this is only the beginning." The Emperor's reply was measured, yet authoritative. "I am nearing your position. Ensure the site is secure. We must understand what these constructs were designed for before any further action is taken." "As you command," Valdor answered. He glanced around the chamber, the faint symbols on the structure pulsing in the shadows. The deeper they ventured, the more it seemed that Terra's ancient past had awakened to challenge them. The oppressive stillness in the chamber settled like a shroud over the assembled warriors and soldiers. Valdor moved silently along the perimeter, observing the reinforced positions and ensuring no weak points were left vulnerable. The structure at the center continued its rhythmic pulsing, the symbols etched across its surface faintly glowing like arteries pumping unseen energy. Captain Voran joined him, his face drawn but resolute. "Defenses are in place, Commander," he reported. "We've repositioned heavy guns and set fallback points in case of another attack. The wounded are being stabilized in the rear line." Valdor nodded, his gaze never leaving the structure. Good. Keep the men alert. This construct is more than a relic. It is reacting to our presence, and it may not be the last of its kind. As if on cue, the rumbling vibrations beneath the floor intensified. One of the engineers monitoring seismic activity relayed a warning over the Vox. Commander Valdor, we're picking up multiple subterranean signatures converging on this location. Large, fast-moving, at least 3 primary contacts. Estimated time to contact? Valdor asked. 7 minutes, maybe less, the engineer replied. Valdor turned to Voran. Prepare the men for another assault. The constructs will not give us time to study this site uninterrupted. They come to protect whatever lies deeper. Voran saluted sharply and moved quickly to relay the orders. Around the chamber, soldiers loaded ammunition, checked their equipment, and took up defensive positions. The atmosphere grew tense as the vibrations became rhythmic, like heavy footfalls approaching from every direction. One of the scouts, positioned near a collapsed tunnel, reported in. Commander, I see movement, large figures emerging from the mist. Stand your ground. Do not engage until ordered, Valdor commanded, stepping forward to take a better view of the tunnel entrance. From the depths of the passage, hulking silhouettes materialized in the dim light. These new constructs were larger and more grotesque than those encountered before. Their forms were a nightmarish blend of mechanical and organic elements, their twisted limbs reinforced with rusted armor plating. Unlike the mindless hordes of mutants, these entities moved with unnerving purpose, their eyes glowing like molten coals. Defensive positions. Now! Valdor's command rang out across the chamber. The constructs advanced slowly, their heavy steps sending tremors through the ground. They paused just beyond the range of the soldiers' weapons, as if gauging the defenses. One of them released a low, metallic growl that echoed ominously. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Commander, they're waiting, Voran said quietly. They are not mindless, Valdor replied. He tightened his grip on his spear. They understand what we are here for. The lead construct suddenly emitted a resonant harmonic signal, a deep vibration that caused the central monolith to pulse brighter. The ground beneath them quaked violently as machinery buried in the walls began to stir. Conduits overhead lit with intermittent flashes, casting strobe-like patterns across the chamber. Open fire, Valdor ordered. The chamber erupted into chaos. Bolters, las weapons, and plasma cannons unleashed their fury, hammering the advancing constructs with concentrated fire. Explosions rocked the tunnel entrances as heavy munitions tore into the walls, but the constructs pressed forward undeterred. One of the larger entities reached the perimeter, slamming its reinforced arm into a barricade. The impact sent several soldiers flying, but Valdor was already there, his spear lashing out with lightning speed. The weapon struck true, piercing through a joint in the creature's armor. Sparks and ichor sprayed from the wound, but the creature retaliated, swinging a massive clawed limb at Valdor. He dodged with inhuman agility, countering with a series of precise strikes that forced the creature back. Thunder Warriors moved to reinforce him, their chain weapons roaring as they tore into the attackers. At the rear line, Captain Voran barked orders to his men. Focus on disabling their limbs. We need to slow them down. The soldiers followed his command, targeting the construct's vulnerable joints and exposed components. One of the Terran heavy teams fired a plasma blast that struck a construct's torso, causing it to stagger. A coordinated volley of auto gunfire finished the job, sending the hulking form crashing to the ground. Despite the success, the constructs kept advancing, their numbers and resilience stretching the defenders to their limits. Another tremor shook the chamber, causing sections of the ceiling to crack and collapse. Dust and debris rained down as the constructs pressed their advantage. Commander Valdor, we're losing structural integrity, an engineer reported. If this continues, the entire chamber could come down on us. Valdor assessed the situation rapidly. We cannot retreat yet. Captain Voran, secure the wounded and prepare to reposition toward the southern passage. Thunder Warriors, hold this line with me. Voran gave a quick nod and began organizing the fallback. The Terran soldiers fought valiantly, covering their comrades as they pulled the injured from the line. The constructs, sensing the shift in the battle, pushed harder. One of them, a towering monstrosity with jagged mechanical limbs, charged directly at the core defensive line. Valdor met it head-on, his spear crackling with golden light as he drove the weapon into its chest. The creature shrieked, its body convulsing as Valdor twisted the spear deeper, severing critical power conduits. With a final deafening roar, the construct collapsed in a heap of shattered metal and organic remnants. The other constructs hesitated, their movements faltering as if disrupted by the loss of their leader. Valdor seized the moment. "Press the attack," he commanded. The defenders surged forward, driving the remaining constructs back into the tunnels. Explosions echoed through the passageways as demolition charges detonated, sealing off key entrances. Within minutes, the battle was over. The chamber was once again silent, save for the distant rumbling of still active machinery. "Status report," Valdor called out. Voran's voice came through the Vox. "No further contacts. We've reinforced the fallback positions and stabilized the perimeter. Casualties remain manageable." Valdor exhaled slowly, his gaze returning to the central monolith. Its pulsing light had dimmed, but the symbols across its surface continued to shift subtly. Whatever force animated these constructs had been disrupted, but the underlying threat remained. "The Emperor will arrive soon," Valdor said. "We hold this ground until then. The secrets buried here will not remain hidden much longer." The aftermath of the battle left an uneasy calm in the chamber. Soldiers moved quietly among the wounded, retrieving their fallen and repairing damaged emplacements. Engineers worked to stabilize the chamber's structure, reinforcing key support columns as faint tremors persisted beneath the floor. Valdor stood before the central monolith, his gaze fixed on the shifting symbols that pulsed faintly across its surface. Despite the construct's temporary dormancy, he could sense that it was not fully deactivated. It was merely waiting. The silence was broken by the arrival of an escort team from the southern tunnel. The sound of steady, armored footsteps echoed through the chamber, drawing the attention of all present. The Emperor had arrived. Golden light seemed to accompany his presence, casting an aura that illuminated the darkened recesses of the vast chamber. His towering form was clad in ornate armor that reflected both grandeur and authority. Though his expression was calm, his eyes burned with a fierce intensity that left none who saw them unaffected. "Valdor," the Emperor greeted, his voice both gentle and commanding. "You have done well to secure this place." Valdor inclined his head in deference. "We encountered significant resistance, my lord. Constructs defending the area displayed both mechanical precision and corrupted biological components. I believe they were responding to the monolith's activation." The Emperor approached the structure, his gaze narrowing as he studied the intricate patterns etched across its surface. His presence seemed to agitate the symbols, causing them to pulse faster in chaotic rhythms. "These designs are not unfamiliar," he said, tracing his gauntleted fingers lightly over the shifting symbols. "They are remnants of an experiment long abandoned, an attempt to create self-regulating bio-industrial systems designed to adapt and evolve. It seems this system has persisted far beyond its intended purpose, corrupted by the conditions of old night." Captain Voran stepped forward, saluting respectfully. "My lord, are we to assume the remaining tunnels are part of this network?" "Indeed," the Emperor replied. "The network beneath the Atlan Wastes likely spans vast regions of Terra. It was once meant to control and sustain ecosystems during the dark age of technology. Now, it has become a threat that cannot be allowed to spread." He turned to Valdor. "We must uncover the full extent of this network, disable its control nodes, and sever its influence over the creatures that guard it. However, total destruction may not be necessary. If any part of this system can be repurposed for our cause, we must make the attempt." Valdor nodded. "I will lead the vanguard. We have located additional pathways leading deeper into the complex. Some of our scouts detected more machinery reactivating within those sectors." The Emperor placed a hand on Valdor's shoulder. "Go with caution. These relics may be more dangerous than the constructs you have already faced." The forces divided into smaller strike teams, each tasked with securing key nodes throughout the tunnel network. Valdor led the central assault team, flanked by elite Thunder Warriors and Terran heavy squads. The tremors intensified as they ventured further into the labyrinth, passing through vast corridors lined with dormant machinery. "Movement detected," a scout reported through the Vox. Multiple contacts ahead, construct signatures similar to the previous engagement. Valdor halted the column. Prepare for engagement, maintain formation, and await my signal. As they approached a massive arched chamber, the machines stirred to life once more. Columns of light shot from hidden apertures in the walls, illuminating a horde of constructs that had been lying in wait. Unlike before, these entities were configured differently, larger and more heavily reinforced, with additional appendages designed for close-quarters combat. "Thunder Warriors, forward!" Valdor ordered. The vanguard surged ahead, their weapons roaring as they clashed with the constructs. Bolters and plasma cannons lit the chamber in blinding bursts of fire. The constructs retaliated with brutal efficiency, their strikes causing shockwaves that cracked the floor beneath them. Valdor fought with unrelenting focus, his spear darting between plates of armor to disable vital components. Beside him, the Thunder Warriors unleashed devastating fury, tearing through the enemy line with chain axes and heavy blades. Despite their ferocity, the constructs adapted quickly, changing their formation to block key points of advance. "Captain Voran, reinforce the left flank," Valdor commanded through the Vox. "Understood, Commander," came the reply. Moments later, Terran soldiers moved into position, setting up suppressive fire along the flank. Explosions rocked the enemy formation as demolition charges detonated, forcing the constructs to retreat momentarily. "They're adjusting tactics," Voran noted as he directed his men. "It's like they're learning from each engagement." "They are," Valdor responded grimly, "but they are not invincible." He surged forward, targeting one of the larger constructs. With a powerful thrust, he drove his spear into its core, severing an energy conduit. The construct collapsed in a heap of sparking metal, and the tide of battle began to turn. The soldiers and warriors pushed forward, gaining ground inch by inch. Eventually, the remaining constructs broke apart, their systems failing under the sustained assault. The echoes of combat faded, leaving only the steady hum of distant machinery. "Secure the area," Valdor ordered, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Engineers, assess any remaining technology. We need to understand what powers this network." As the soldiers regrouped, Captain Voran approached Valdor, his expression thoughtful. "These constructs were far more advanced than anything we've seen before. If this is what the network has hidden in its depths, we may be facing something beyond even our understanding." Valdor met his gaze. "Perhaps, but that is why we must uncover its full extent. The Emperor's vision for Terra leaves no room for threats buried in darkness." The chamber grew silent again as the forces prepared for the next phase of the campaign. The symbols on the monolith continued to pulse faintly, as if in defiance of the Emperor's efforts to extinguish the past. The network of tunnels stretched deeper into the earth, becoming more labyrinthine and alien in design. The pulsing energy from the central monolith grew fainter the further Valdor's forces advanced, but the atmosphere remained charged with tension. Every step echoed unnaturally, and the occasional tremor sent unsettling vibrations through the floor. Reports from other strike teams trickled in over the VoxNet. Each group faced similar resistance, constructs appearing in coordinated formations, using tunnel layouts to their advantage. Yet, despite the challenges, progress was being made. "Commander Valdor," a voice crackled through his comm link. It was one of the lead engineers stationed at the last secured outpost. "We've completed initial analysis of the captured constructs. They were integrated with both organic and warp-altered components, though not in the same way as mutants. It's as if they were designed to evolve alongside biological life." Valdor processed the report with a slight frown. "Has the Emperor reviewed these findings?" "Yes, my lord. He believes this is tied to an attempt at long-term environmental regulation, but something corrupted the original system. We're continuing our study." Valdor gave a curt nod and cut the link. Whatever this ancient system had been intended for, it was clear that it had fallen far from its creator's purpose. The path ahead widened into a vast, open space. Another chamber, though this one was eerily empty. Massive, broken pillars lay scattered across the ground, and the walls were lined with half-collapsed machinery. Pale mist hung in the air, faintly illuminated by residual energy leaking from the damaged constructs embedded in the chamber's architecture. Valdor raised his hand, signaling the vanguard to halt. His senses sharpened as he scanned the surroundings. Something about the chamber felt wrong. The quiet was not the stillness of peace, but of a predator lying in wait. Lumen intensifiers on full, Valdor ordered. The soldiers activated additional lights, flooding the chamber with a harsh glare. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, almost imperceptibly, the mist began to shift, curling toward the center of the room as if pulled by an unseen force. "Contacts?" Valdor asked, his voice low and calm. "Negative," a scout replied, though his tone was uncertain. No visual confirmation, but the mist, it's reacting to something. A deep, resonant sound echoed through the chamber. It wasn't mechanical, it was almost a voice. The sound resonated in waves, bypassing their ears and vibrating deep within their chests. Several soldiers staggered, momentarily disoriented. Valdor tightened his grip on his spear and advanced toward the center of the room. "Hold position. This is not a simple defensive trap. Something is attempting to affect us directly. Do not allow fear to take hold." Captain Voran stepped up beside him, his face pale but determined. "What are we dealing with, my lord? Warp interference?" "Possibly," Valdor answered, "or a remnant of the ancient mechanisms tied to this network. We cannot rule out the presence of psychic resonance in these depths." As they moved further into the chamber, the mist parted to reveal a central dais. Upon it lay what appeared to be an inactive control mechanism, a large oblong construct partially embedded in the ground. Its surface was smooth and black, marked by a lattice of faintly glowing sigils. The Emperor's voice crackled through Valdor's vox. "Describe what you see." "We have found a control node, my lord," Valdor replied. "It appears dormant but is emitting psychic disturbances. It may have been designed to interact with biological minds, possibly to regulate the entire network." There was a brief pause before the Emperor responded. "Do not engage directly. These systems were created to manipulate the environments of entire biospheres. If corrupted, they could cause catastrophic reactions." Valdor signaled for the engineers to begin a cautious survey of the construct. "Begin scans," he ordered. "Do not touch the mechanism until we have confirmation of its condition." The engineers moved forward, their Auspex devices humming as they scanned the construct. Data streams appeared on their handheld displays showing fluctuating energy levels and faint psychic feedback loops. One of the engineers, a veteran of several deep strike campaigns, approached Valdor. "Commander, this construct, it's designed to respond to life signs," she explained. "It adapts to nearby biological entities, possibly regulating environmental conditions based on their needs. But the readings are unstable. There's interference, almost like it's caught between conflicting directives." "Can it be stabilized?" Valdor asked. "Uncertain. We'll need more time, but there's a risk it could trigger a defensive response if tampered with." Before Valdor could reply, the ground shook violently. Alarms blared across the Vox as seismic activity surged to dangerous levels. The control node flared with sudden intensity, its sigils blazing in bright, erratic patterns. "Defensive positions," Valdor commanded. The tremors intensified and cracks spread across the chamber floor. From the shadows surrounding the dais, new shapes began to emerge, tall, humanoid figures clad in armor unlike any seen before. They were not constructs nor mutants. These figures radiated a psychic presence, their eyes glowing with an eerie inner light. "Identify yourselves," Valdor called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. The figures did not respond with words. Instead, one of them raised a staff-like weapon, and the psychic pressure in the room surged. Soldiers staggered under the weight of the assault, and several fell to their knees, clutching their heads in pain. Valdor stepped forward, his spear blazing with energy as he countered the psychic attack. The pressure lessened as his presence cut through the oppressive force like a beacon of stability. "Hold the line," he ordered firmly. "We face a new enemy. Engage with precision. Disable, do not destroy unless necessary." The chamber erupted into conflict once more. The psychic warriors advanced with controlled movements, their attacks coordinated and devastating. Thunder warriors engaged them head-on, their chain weapons clashing against psychic shields that crackled with ethereal energy. Voran led his soldiers in flanking maneuvers, directing heavy fire to disrupt the enemy's formation. One of the Terran squads managed to disable a psychic warrior's weapon, causing it to fall back in disarray. Valdor confronted the largest of the figures directly. Their weapons clashed, and psychic energy flared violently around them. The creature's strength was formidable, but Valdor's training and discipline proved superior. With a swift strike, he shattered its defenses, forcing it to retreat. The tide began to shift. The Terran forces and Thunder Warriors pressed their advantage, driving the enemy back toward the shadows. One by one, the Psychic Warriors vanished, leaving only the fading echoes of their presence. The chamber fell silent once more. The control node dimmed, its sigils flickering as though exhausted. Valdor surveyed the scene, his senses alert for any lingering threats. "Report," he ordered. "All clear," Voran replied. "Minimal casualties." The enemy retreated before we could capture any for interrogation. Valdor activated his Vox link. "The control node has been contained, my lord. We encountered hostile psychers, likely tied to the network's corruption, awaiting further orders." The Emperor's voice resonated across the link. "Prepare for a full analysis. We are closer to understanding this system's purpose. We will soon decide its fate." Valdor lowered his spear, the tension in his body easing only slightly. The deeper truths of Terra's past were surfacing, and with them came dangers that defied both logic and memory. The echoes of battle slowly faded into the distance as the engineers resumed their work on the control node. The chamber's atmosphere remained heavy, charged with residual psychic energy. Despite the relative calm, every warrior and soldier remained on high alert, knowing that danger could resurface without warning. Valdor moved between the defensive positions, his gaze unwavering. The Emperor had entrusted him with maintaining control of this site, and he would see that duty carried out without faltering. He paused near one of the engineers, who was meticulously reviewing the data streaming from her Auspex device. "Report on the construct's current state," Valdor requested. The engineer adjusted her equipment, her expression tense but focused. "The core system is stabilizing, Commander, but there are still traces of conflicting commands embedded in its protocols. It seems this node was once part of a planetary regulation network, likely designed to influence entire ecosystems. However, its functions have been corrupted, and the psychic energy within appears to be amplifying those errors." Valdor considered her words carefully. "Do you believe it can be fully neutralized without triggering another surge?" "Possibly, but if we disrupt its command pathways too forcefully, it could reactivate defenses across the entire network," she warned. "I recommend a phased shutdown rather than an outright severance of its control systems." Valdor nodded. "Proceed with caution. We cannot afford another large-scale engagement while still advancing deeper into the network." As the engineer continued her work, Captain Voran approached from the southern flank, his armor dusted with debris from the earlier skirmish. "Commander," Voran began, "scouts have completed a preliminary sweep of the next sector. They've identified a large chasm ahead, likely a key structural hub for this complex. No signs of constructs yet, but they reported strange sound patterns, like chanting, almost." Valdor's expression remained neutral, though his mind sharpened at the report. "Chanting? Yes," Voran confirmed. "Could be echoes from distant tunnels or something more deliberate. The men are uneasy, and I can't blame them. Whatever's generating those sounds isn't mechanical." Valdor turned his gaze toward the tunnel that led further into the labyrinth. "We advance. If this network is capable of producing such disturbances, it may be tied to the psychic presence we encountered earlier. I will lead the vanguard personally, ensure that all fallback points remain secure." The vanguard advanced cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the damp, uneven ground. The air grew colder the further they descended, and the strange sound patterns became more distinct. What had initially seemed like distant echoes now resembled a low, rhythmic chant reverberating through the walls as though carried by unseen currents. "Keep formation," Valdor instructed, his voice cutting through the tension. "Do not be distracted by the sounds. Focus on your objectives." The Thunder Warriors maintained their disciplined march, weapons at the ready. The Terran soldiers followed close behind, their expressions wary but determined. Captain Voran walked alongside his men, issuing quiet reassurances as they moved deeper into the unknown. As they approached the edge of the chasm, the full scale of the structure beneath the wastes revealed itself. Massive columns of twisted metal and stone stretched across the vast expanse, supporting a series of interconnected platforms and bridges. The entire area pulsed faintly with the same strange energy that had permeated the earlier chambers, and the chanting grew louder, though its source remained unseen. "This is unlike any other section we've encountered," Voran remarked, surveying the sprawling architecture. It's almost ritualistic in design. An attempt to control or communicate with the system, Valdor replied. Perhaps those who maintained this network believed they could influence it through psychic resonance. Valdor raised his hand, signaling the vanguard to fan out and secure the surrounding platforms. Scouts moved quickly across the bridges, their movements silent and precise. Auspec's readings showed no immediate threats, but the oppressive atmosphere suggested otherwise. Moments later, a scout's voice came through the vox. Commander, we've located a structure at the center of the chasm, a large altar-like construct. It's emitting a low-frequency signal, and the chanting seems to be resonating from it. Understood, Valdor responded. Hold position and await further orders. I will examine the site personally. Valdor led a contingent of Thunder Warriors and engineers across the central bridge. The structure ahead loomed ominously, its surface covered in geometric carvings that seemed to shift in response to their presence. As they drew closer, the chanting reached a crescendo before abruptly ceasing. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying the sound of their footsteps. Strange, one of the engineers muttered. It's as if the entire network paused. Prepare for contact, Valdor said quietly. As if on cue, the altar flared with blinding light. Psychic energy surged outward in a wave, momentarily disorienting the soldiers. From the shadows beyond the platforms, figures began to emerge, humanoid shapes wrapped in shrouds of energy, their forms indistinct and constantly shifting. These are not constructs, Voran said through gritted teeth, raising his weapon. No, Valdor agreed, stepping forward with his spear raised. These are something far older. The figures halted at the edge of the platforms, observing the intruders with a cold, unearthly gaze. One of them stepped forward, its voice echoing with layered tones that reverberated through the chamber. Why do you disturb the sleepers of the deep? It intoned, each word carrying a psychic undertone that pressed against the minds of those present. We are here to secure what was lost, Valdor answered firmly. This place has fallen into corruption. It threatens the future of Terra. The figure's form flickered, its voice becoming more forceful. The balance was broken long ago. You seek to purge what you do not understand. The echoes of the past will not be silenced so easily. Valdor's grip on his spear tightened. If you intend to resist, you will be overcome. We do not fear the relics of a forgotten age. The figure's eyes flared with a sudden brilliance. Then you will face the truth of what lies buried. The past still breathes beneath your feet. The entities advanced without further warning, their psychic energy lashing out like invisible blades. Valdor surged forward to meet them, his spear flashing in arcs of golden light. The final confrontation with the hidden guardians of the network had begun. The air around the platform vibrated with psychic force as the entities launched their attack. Waves of invisible energy rippled outward, shaking the entire structure and distorting the mist that clung to the ground. Valdor pushed through the storm, his spear flashing as he deflected a barrage of psychic assaults. Each strike from his weapon disrupted the surrounding energy, momentarily clearing the oppressive field. Maintain formation, Valdor commanded, his voice cutting through the psychic tumult. The Thunder Warriors obeyed, advancing with brutal precision. Their bolters roared, sending explosive rounds toward the shrouded figures. Some of the entities flickered and collapsed under the sustained fire, their forms unraveling like broken reflections. Others retaliated with bursts of psychic power, hurling shards of telekinetic force that sent warriors staggering. Valdor surged toward one of the central figures, spear leveled for a killing strike. The entity raised a staff-like weapon and unleashed a torrent of energy that crackled like a storm in the air. Valdor pivoted, the spear's energy field absorbing part of the blast as he closed the distance in a blur of movement. His spear pierced the figure's chest, sending a shockwave of light and force through the platform. The entity shattered into scattered fragments of glowing mist before fading into nothingness. On the right flank, Captain Voran led the Terran soldiers in a flanking maneuver. The soldiers moved with disciplined precision, targeting weak points in the enemy formation. Focus fire! Disrupt their concentration, Voran ordered as last fire cut through the swirling mist. The coordinated assault forced several of the entities to falter, their attacks weakening under the relentless pressure. One of the psychic figures attempted to counter by raising a barrier of energy, but a well-placed plasma shot from a heavy gunner broke through the shield, scattering the entity in a flash of white light. Despite the growing success, the battle remained fierce. Several constructs from the surrounding tunnels reactivated, their hulking forms entering the fray. The corrupted machines advanced toward the Terran defensive line, forcing the soldiers to divide their focus. "We've got incoming constructs," a soldier shouted over the Vox. "They're pushing toward the rear positions." Voran quickly adjusted his tactics. "Second squad, hold the bridge. Heavy weapons, concentrate fire on the machines." Explosions rocked the chamber as demolition charges detonated along the bridge supports. The constructs stumbled, temporarily slowed by the debris. Terran soldiers fired in unison, targeting critical components on the mechanical abominations. Sparks and hydraulic fluids sprayed across the platform as the constructs were gradually disabled. Amid the chaos, Valdor fought with a relentless focus. His spear carved a path through both psychic entities and corrupted constructs alike. His movements were fluid, each strike a calculated execution. He could feel the energy of the network fluctuating, as if the system itself was beginning to unravel under the strain of the battle. "Commander, the control node is destabilizing," an engineer reported through the Vox. "We're detecting rapid energy surges across the entire sector. If this continues, structural collapse is imminent." Valdor's mind worked quickly. The enemy forces were faltering, but the danger of the entire chamber collapsing was growing by the second. He activated his Vox link to the Emperor. "My lord, the control node is deteriorating. We may need to initiate a phase shutdown or risk losing the entire complex." The Emperor's response was immediate, calm but resolute. "You will not retreat, Valdor. Stabilize the node if possible. I am making my way to your position. We must contain the core of this network." "As you command," Valdor replied. He turned to the engineers. "Prepare a containment field. We will hold this ground until reinforcements arrive." The engineers scrambled to deploy portable stabilizers around the control node. They activated energy dampeners, creating a faint, glowing barrier that encased the core structure. The sigils on the node flickered erratically, but began to dim under the influence of the containment field. Meanwhile, the remaining psychic entities launched a desperate counterattack. One of them, taller and more solid in form than the others, advanced directly toward Valdor. Its presence radiated a powerful psychic pressure that made the surrounding air feel heavy, almost suffocating. The figure's voice echoed through Valdor's mind, layered with distorted tones. "You cannot sever what has been bound for millennia. This place remembers." Valdor remained unfazed. "The only legacy this place holds is one of failure. We are here to end it." The entity unleashed a psychic blast that warped the space around them, sending shockwaves across the platform. Valdor braced himself, pushing through the disorienting force. His spear ignited with golden light as he charged forward, meeting the entity head-on. Their clash sent a blinding flash of energy through the chamber, causing nearby soldiers to shield their eyes. The entity fought with calculated precision, striking with both psychic power and physical force. Valdor parried each blow with fluid grace, his counterattacks relentless. Finally, with a swift series of strikes, he disrupted the entity's psychic core. The figure shuddered, its form destabilizing as cracks of golden light spread across its body. With a final thrust of his spear, Valdor pierced the core, causing the entity to explode in a burst of dissipating energy. The remaining enemies faltered, their connection to the control node severed. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, their forms fading like whispers in the mist. The constructs also began to power down, their movements slowing until they collapsed into inert heaps of metal. "Area secured," Valdor announced over the Vox. "Prepare for final stabilization procedures." Engineers confirmed that the control node was stabilizing, though its energy levels remained erratic. Captain Voran regrouped with his forces, his armor scratched and scarred but still intact. "Minimal casualties, Commander," Voran reported. "The defenses held, but this network isn't going to stop fighting us. It's almost like it has a will of its own." Valdor nodded. "Perhaps, but will alone is not enough to stop the Emperor's vision." A sudden, calming presence filled the chamber as the Emperor finally arrived. His golden light pushed away the lingering psychic echoes, restoring a sense of order to the chaotic scene. He approached the control node and observed the containment field with a measured gaze. "You have done well, Valdor," the Emperor said. "The core is stable for now, but there is still work to be done. This network's secrets are not yet fully revealed." "We stand ready to continue, my lord," Valdor replied. The Emperor turned toward the deeper tunnels. "Good, we move forward. The fate of Terra's forgotten past will be decided here." The forces advanced deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the Atlan Wastes, their path now illuminated by the Emperor's presence. His golden aura pushed back the unnatural mist, stabilizing the corrupted environment as they pressed forward. Yet even with his influence, the atmosphere remained oppressive, charged with ancient energies that defied full comprehension. Valdor marched at the Emperor's side, ever vigilant, his senses attuned to any changes in the surroundings. Captain Voran and his Terran soldiers maintained defensive formations, their weapons ready and their nerves steady despite the tension in the air. Scouts reported periodically from ahead, their Auspex scans showing both mechanical remnants and faint shifting energy patterns deeper in the complex. "We're approaching a critical nexus," one of the engineers announced over the Vox. "This section appears to be a central point where multiple tunnels converge. If our readings are accurate, this area houses the core interface of the network." "Core interface," Valdor echoed quietly. "If that is correct, then this will be the most heavily defended sector yet." "Exactly," the Emperor said, his tone calm but commanding. "Prepare for significant resistance. This is likely the heart of the network, where its corrupted functions maintain control. We will dismantle it, but we must do so with precision." The path soon widened into another colossal chamber. Massive support structures stretched into the darkness above, their surfaces covered in faded inscriptions that glowed faintly as the forces drew nearer. At the chamber's center stood an immense construct, a towering spire of metal and crystalline material that radiated chaotic pulses of psychic energy. It appeared to have grown out of the very earth, merging ancient technology with warped organic forms. Valdor signaled for the vanguard to halt. "Spread out and secure the perimeter. Engineers, begin scanning the spire. Identify weak points or access nodes." As the warriors and soldiers moved into position, the chamber began to stir. The pulsing light of the spire intensified, and distant echoes reverberated through the vast space. The engineers' Auspex devices began to malfunction, their readings overwhelmed by a surge of electromagnetic interference. "Something's waking up," one of the engineers muttered, frantically adjusting her scanner. Before anyone could respond, shapes emerged from hidden alcoves in the walls. Dozens of constructs, more advanced and heavily armored than those encountered earlier. Their designs were sleeker, but more grotesque, their limbs reinforced with crystalline plating that shimmered with residual energy. Their eyes glowed with the same chaotic light emanating from the spire. "Enemy contacts closing," a scout reported. "Multiple hostiles inbound from all directions. Defensive positions," Valdor commanded. "Thunder Warriors, form the vanguard. Captain Voran, secure the rear and protect the engineers." The chamber erupted into chaos as the constructs surged forward. Bolter fire tore into the advancing horde, and las cannons fired concentrated beams that shattered crystalline armor. Yet the constructs did not falter. Their movements were faster and more coordinated than before, suggesting a direct connection to the spire's influence. Valdor led the charge at the center of the line, his spear crackling with golden energy. He engaged a towering construct in brutal melee combat, parrying a strike from its crystalline arm before driving his spear through its chest. The construct convulsed, discharging a burst of psychic energy as it collapsed. On the left flank, Voran directed his soldiers with precision, suppressing fire on the elevated positions. "Keep them pinned down." A Terran heavy team fired a plasma salvo into an approaching cluster of constructs, causing a chain reaction that sent shards of crystal and metal scattering across the platform. The soldiers pressed their advantage, maintaining control of the flank despite the relentless assault. "Engineers! Status!" Valdor demanded as he deflected another strike and severed a construct's limbs with a fluid counterattack. "We're detecting massive power fluctuations in the spire," an engineer shouted. "It's acting as both a relay and a control node. If we overload its core, we might disrupt the entire network." "Then overload it," Valdor ordered. "We will hold until the task is complete." The engineers moved swiftly, deploying stabilization arrays and power converters near the base of the spire. Sparks flew as they connected their equipment to exposed conduits, working under constant fire from the constructs. The Emperor stepped forward, raising his hand toward the spire. The chaotic pulses of energy began to slow, as if restrained by his presence. He spoke quietly, his words resonating on a psychic level that reached across the entire chamber. This network was built with the intention of regulating Terra's ecosystems, but it was flawed from the beginning, he said, his voice echoing in the minds of all present. Now it has become a prison of its own design, sustained by corrupted directives. Its influence must be severed. As his words faded, a shockwave of psychic energy rippled outward from the spire. The constructs froze momentarily, disoriented by the sudden disruption. Valdor seized the opportunity, rallying the warriors for a counter-offensive. "Advance!" he commanded. "Crush the remaining hostiles before they recover." The Thunder Warriors surged forward, their weapons tearing through the immobilized constructs with ruthless efficiency. Terran soldiers provided covering fire, targeting stragglers and disabling automated defenses that had reactivated near the chamber's perimeter. Within moments, the tide of battle shifted decisively. The last of the constructs collapsed, their crystalline cores shattering under sustained fire. The engineers finalized the overload process, triggering a controlled surge of power within the spire. "Overload complete," an engineer reported. "The network is destabilizing. We've got about 2 minutes before the entire system resets. Fall back to the outer platforms," Valdor ordered. "Maintain defensive positions until the reset is complete." The forces withdrew in coordinated waves, regrouping on elevated platforms as the spire's energy output reached critical levels. Bright arcs of light surged across its surface, accompanied by a deafening hum that filled the chamber. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire structure would collapse, but then, with a final pulse of light, the energy subsided. The chamber grew still once more, the oppressive psychic presence finally dissipating. The Emperor lowered his hand, the glow surrounding him dimming slightly. He turned to Valdor and the assembled warriors. "The network's control has been severed," he said. "The remnants of this system will no longer pose a threat to Terra. However, there may still be knowledge within these ruins that can serve our greater purpose." Valdor stepped forward and bowed his head. "What are your orders, my lord?" "Secure the remaining nodes and ensure that no further corruption lingers," the Emperor replied. "Once the area is fully pacified, we will decide which aspects of this technology are worth preserving." The warriors and soldiers stood silently, reflecting on the battle they had just survived. Though the immediate danger had passed, they knew their mission was far from over. The echoes of Terra's ancient past still whispered in the shadows, waiting to be fully understood. The distant tremors that had plagued the tunnels for hours finally ceased, leaving the air unnervingly still. Valdor stood on the central platform, his gaze sweeping across the ruined constructs and fractured columns. The engineers under Captain Voran's supervision dismantled the remaining control interfaces to prevent reactivation, their tools clattering in the vast silence. The Emperor surveyed the chamber with a quiet intensity. Though the primary threat had been neutralized, he remained deep in thought, as if contemplating something unseen. His eyes narrowed as he spoke, addressing Valdor without turning. "Do you feel it, Valdor? The remnants of this system still stir, faintly, as though waiting." Valdor tightened his grip on his spear. He had sensed it as well, an underlying hum at the edges of perception, a whisper of power still buried deep within the complex. "Yes, my lord, the core structure may have been weakened, but the network itself is vast. There could be other nodes beyond our reach." "Correct," the Emperor said, his voice resonating with both certainty and finality. "This system was likely designed with redundancies. Destroying a single node may disrupt it temporarily, but the core directives endure. We must ensure those directives are fully erased." Captain Voran approached, his armor bearing fresh scars from the recent engagement. "Commander Valdor, the soldiers have finished securing this sector. We've encountered no further hostiles since the spire's shutdown." "Good," Valdor replied, "but remain vigilant. The enemy has demonstrated an ability to adapt. They may return from unexpected vectors." Voran nodded and turned to relay further orders to his officers. The Emperor began walking toward a tunnel entrance leading deeper into the complex, and Valdor followed without hesitation. "We press forward," the Emperor said. "The heart of this system is not yet fully revealed. The echoes of the past still shape this place, and they must be silenced." The next phase of the advance was methodical, with squads rotating between forward and rear positions to maintain endurance. The Terran soldiers, though weary, pushed onward with the grim determination born of loyalty and fear of failure. The Thunder Warriors remained an unbreakable force, their presence reinforcing the morale of the unaugmented troops. Several kilometers into the march, they encountered an anomaly, a vast open cavity in the rock, shaped unnaturally as if hollowed out by massive drilling machines in the distant past. Strange crystalline formations jutted from the cavern walls, emitting a faint bioluminescent glow. This was not a natural formation, an engineer observed. These crystal structures appear alive. Valdor knelt near one of the formations, examining the faint pulsing within the crystal's core. "Not alive in the traditional sense," he corrected, "but resonant. The psychic energy within them may be part of the network's infrastructure. They could be transmitting commands across the entire complex." "Shall we destroy them, my lord?" Voran asked, stepping closer. "Not yet," the Emperor interjected. "Their purpose remains unclear. If they are indeed relay points, they may lead us to the true core of this network. We will follow the signals." As the forces reorganized to press on, the atmosphere shifted once again. Faint whispers echoed through the cavern, soft, barely perceptible voices that seemed to drift on the edges of hearing. Some of the soldiers shuddered, exchanging uneasy glances. "Sir, did you hear that?" a young soldier murmured to his comrade. "Keep moving," Voran ordered firmly, silencing the growing murmurs of fear. Valdor strode forward without hesitation, his voice steady as he addressed the assembled troops. "Whatever you hear is a trick of the environment. Focus on the mission. No distractions." The voices faded as they moved deeper into the cavern, though an uneasy tension remained. The path ahead narrowed into a corridor carved with intricate symbols similar to those on the control node. This time, however, the carvings glowed more brightly, as though reacting to their presence. "Commander, energy readings are spiking," an engineer warned. "We're approaching another significant node." Valdor halted and turned to the Emperor. "Your assessment, my lord." The Emperor's gaze lingered on the symbols. "We are nearing the true heart of this network. Prepare for whatever guardians remain. They will not allow us to proceed without a final confrontation." Valdor raised his spear, signaling the troops to prepare for battle. "Form defensive lines. Engineers, stay close to the center and be ready to disable any active systems." The chamber beyond the corridor loomed in darkness, waiting like a predator ready to strike. The forces of the Emperor steeled themselves for the challenge ahead. The corridor led into a cavernous expanse that seemed impossibly large, as though it extended far beyond the limits of the tunnels they had traversed. Faint, rhythmic pulses of light danced along the walls, flowing through crystalline conduits embedded in the rock. At the center of the chamber rose a vast, tiered structure, half altar, half machine, radiating waves of psychic energy that sent subtle tremors through the air. "Another node," Captain Voran muttered under his breath, scanning the expanse with narrowed eyes. Valdor stepped forward, his armored boots echoing across the uneven floor. "This is different," he said quietly. "It isn't just a control point. It's a nexus." The Emperor's voice carried softly but resonantly through the chamber. This was a hub of immense significance. Here, the ancient custodians of Terra attempted to control their world through force of will and machine logic. But like all imperfect tools, it turned against them. The soldiers and warriors positioned themselves around the perimeter as engineers activated scanning devices. Auspex units pulsed with distorted readings as though the very air resisted comprehension. The faint whispers heard earlier began to return, growing in volume. "Hostiles detected," one of the scouts reported abruptly. "Multiple contacts, constructs converging from multiple vectors." "Prepare for contact," Valdor ordered. "Engineers, stay within the defensive lines." Thunder Warriors and Terran soldiers moved swiftly into formation. Weapons were trained on the tunnels leading into the chamber, their barrels glowing faintly from ready status. Moments later, the constructs emerged, sleeker and more menacing than before. These entities radiated a fusion of psychic and mechanical power, their limbs enhanced with crystalline projections that pulsed in time with the chamber's energy field. "They're synchronizing with the Nexus," one of the engineers reported frantically. "If they establish full control, they could use the network to—" "Hold the line," Voran barked, cutting off the warning. The constructs surged forward with terrifying speed, their movements almost fluid as they weaved between cover points. Bolters roared, and the chamber filled with the concussive echoes of gunfire. The initial volley disabled several attackers, but the constructs adapted quickly, raising barriers of psychic energy that deflected subsequent shots. Valdor charged into the fray, his spear crackling with power as he struck down a towering construct attempting to breach the line. Sparks and shards of crystal scattered across the floor as the entity fell, but more constructs pressed forward to replace it. "Focus fire on weak points," Valdor shouted. "Break their synchronization." Plasma fire and heavy bolters targeted the glowing conduits running along the constructs' bodies. The concentrated fire caused chain reactions that shattered the energy flows, forcing several of the attackers to collapse in flickering spasms. Thunder warriors fought with relentless brutality, chain axes cleaving through armored limbs as they pushed the constructs back. Amid the chaos, Valdor noticed something. The Nexus structure itself was reacting to the battle. Pulses of energy grew faster and more erratic, sending shockwaves through the floor. The entire chamber trembled under the strain. "My lord," Valdor said through the Vox, "the Nexus is destabilizing. It's linked directly to these constructs. If we do not disrupt its core functions soon, the entire network could collapse and take us with it." The Emperor stood near the base of the Nexus, observing its shifting patterns with a calm intensity. His hand rested on one of the crystalline interfaces, and for a moment, the chaotic pulses slowed. "This system has resisted for long enough," he said quietly. "It can no longer defy us." The Emperor turned to the engineers. "Begin the shutdown sequence. I will maintain stability while you work. Valdor, maintain defensive positions until the process is complete." Valdor nodded and turned to his warriors. "Hold the perimeter at all costs. No enemy breaches this line." Captain Voran reinforced the command with precision. "You heard the order. Heavy teams, focus on the high ground. Flamers to the front." The constructs launched another coordinated assault, their psychic barriers shimmering as they closed the distance. Explosions rocked the chamber as Terran soldiers detonated traps along key access routes, slowing the attackers' advance. Despite the overwhelming pressure, the defenders held firm, their firepower relentless. Valdor fought with measured ferocity, weaving through the battle with deadly precision. His spear pierced through a construct's core, severing its link to the Nexus. He pivoted to intercept another attacker, driving the weapon into its crystalline limb and shattering it with a single strike. Behind the lines, engineers worked feverishly to synchronize with the Nexus's systems. Sparks flew from exposed conduits as power levels fluctuated wildly. "We've gained partial control," one of the lead engineers reported, "but it's still resisting full shutdown. Some kind of fail-safe is embedded deep within its code." "Override it," Valdor ordered sharply. "I'm trying, but there's—" The engineer's words were drowned out as a massive surge of energy erupted from the Nexus. A towering figure emerged from the platform's core, a fusion of machine and psychic force, its form crackling with unstable energy. It let out a deafening roar, sending waves of telekinetic pressure across the chamber. Valdor locked eyes on the new threat and signaled the vanguard. "With me, we end this now." The Thunder Warriors charged alongside him, their weapons blazing as they clashed with the entity. It fought with brutal strength, its attacks sending shockwaves through the ground. Valdor dodged a swipe from its massive crystalline limb and countered with a powerful thrust of his spear, driving it deep into the entity's torso. The creature staggered, but retaliated with a psychic burst that momentarily disoriented the warriors. The Emperor raised his hand once more, channeling a stabilizing wave that disrupted the entity's power flow. "Its strength lies in the Nexus. Sever its connection, and it will fall," he instructed. Valdor nodded and pressed the attack. He drove his spear into the entity's core, bypassing its defenses. The weapon emitted a burst of golden light that spread through the creature's form, causing fractures to ripple across its crystalline body. With a final surge of coordinated fire from both the Thunder Warriors and Terran soldiers, the entity crumbled, its shattered remains dissolving into mist. The Nexus pulsed one last time before falling silent. The chaotic energy that had filled the chamber faded, leaving only the faint hum of residual power. All hostiles neutralized, Voran confirmed over the Vox. Engineers are reporting full system shutdown. The Emperor descended from the platform, his gaze sweeping across the exhausted but victorious forces. "The core is ours," he said. "The final echoes of this network will fade in time. Terra's past will no longer threaten its future." Valdor lowered his spear and stood at attention. "What are your further orders, my lord?" "Begin securing the remaining tunnels," the Emperor replied. "We will ensure no fragments of this technology are left to fall into the wrong hands. Today, we have claimed another victory for Terra." The chamber fell silent as the forces began their work. Though battered and weary, they stood victorious in the shadow of a legacy that had finally been extinguished. The soldiers and engineers spread throughout the chamber, working with quiet efficiency to dismantle what remained of the Nexus. The glowing symbols on the walls faded entirely as the control systems were deactivated. Engineers carefully severed key power conduits and dismantled unstable components, ensuring no fragment of the network could ever reactivate. Valdor stood near the edge of the platform, overseeing the operation. The Thunder Warriors maintained a vigilant watch on the surrounding tunnels, their eyes scanning for any remaining threats. Though the constructs had been neutralized, no one dared assume complete safety this deep underground. "Perimeter secure," Voran reported as he approached Valdor. "No further movement detected. We've reinforced the primary entry points and deployed sensors along the fallback routes." "Good," Valdor replied. "We remain on guard until the Emperor orders a full withdrawal. The enemy has proven capable of adapting. We will not be caught off guard." Nearby, a group of Terran soldiers gathered to rest after hours of relentless battle. Their faces bore the exhaustion of hard-fought survival, but there was also a quiet pride in their eyes. One of the younger soldiers, still catching his breath, spoke softly to his comrades. "Did you see what happened back there, Commander Valdor? The way he cut down that giant construct like it was nothing." Another soldier nodded, wiping blood from a gash on his arm. "Aye, but you saw how the Thunder Warriors fought too, like walking nightmares. I wouldn't want to face them in battle." "But we held our ground, same as they did," a sergeant added, his voice steady and resolute. "We're fighting for the Emperor's vision, and that's worth everything. Remember that." The young soldier gave a tired smile and nodded. The camaraderie among the Terran forces was evident despite the overwhelming odds they had faced. At the center of the chamber, the Emperor stood silently, gazing upon the remnants of the Nexus. His expression was unreadable, though his presence seemed to radiate a deep sense of purpose. Valdor approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "My lord, the Nexus has been fully dismantled. There are no further signs of hostile activity," Valdor reported. The Emperor remained silent for a moment longer before speaking. "This place is a monument to a forgotten ambition. It sought to control life through mechanisms that could never fully comprehend the complexity of human existence. That failure has echoed through the ages." Valdor inclined his head slightly. "And yet remnants of that ambition remain across Terra. We continue to face the consequences of those who tried to master forces beyond their understanding." "Indeed," the Emperor replied, "but such remnants will no longer dictate the course of humanity's future. We will rebuild from the ashes of these failures and forge a new path, one guided by strength, unity, and truth." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming Vox transmission. One of the forward scouts reported in with urgency. "Commander Valdor, we've detected movement several kilometers beyond our current position. Unknown entities, possible survivors or reinforcements. We're requesting additional support." Valdor turned sharply toward the Emperor, who gave a single nod of approval. "Dispatch reinforcements," Valdor ordered. "We will eliminate any remaining threats before finalizing our withdrawal." Voran immediately mobilized a strike team, coordinating with the scouts. Within minutes, a group of Thunder Warriors and Terran soldiers advanced into the tunnel network, their weapons ready. The engineers completed their final tasks, sealing off the core systems with demolition charges. The chamber's once brilliant glow faded entirely, leaving only the artificial light of the soldiers' lumen strips. With the Nexus neutralized, the oppressive psychic presence that had haunted the depths of the Atlan Wastes seemed to dissipate at last. The Emperor stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "We move forward with caution. There is still much to be done to secure Terra. This victory is but one step on a long journey." The forces gathered, standing in formation as Valdor relayed the Emperor's words across the Vox. Despite their weariness, they stood tall, bolstered by the knowledge that they had triumphed in one of the darkest corners of their world. "Onward," Valdor said quietly, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "The shadows of the past have no place in the future we are building." With renewed determination, the army marched forward into the tunnels, leaving the shattered remnants of the Nexus behind. The echoes of forgotten ambitions faded into silence as Terra's future took one step closer to unification under the Emperor's banner.